Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am here. The person I will reveal just in a moment or two is a man that has just under 1 million views. He's a machine. He puts out 3, 4 videos a day. Don't blink, because another one's coming. A gentleman that I highly respect and have talked to for a while. Uh, Brian from High Impact Vlogs and High Impact Flicks. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
What's up, man? Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, thank you for talking to me. So I think like what I hear you talking about, obviously you do the kind of reaction where you're in the and you read the computer screen, and kind of your audience is built around your personality and what you say, right? Your opinions, because you're would you say that's correct?
Well, I would hope that it wouldn't be because of my personality, because I'm one of those guys who just I'm like, hey, let's do away with the cult of personality. Let's stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Let's clear the cognitive dissonance cobwebs out of our heads, and let's just go with truth. Because I'm a human being, just like everybody else is a human being. You're going to be subject to failure. If somebody's following you, they're following the wrong. Don't follow me. I don't even like to call the people that subscribe to me, follow. For example, Disorderly Product News and High Impact Vlogs. Disorderly Product News has a specialty. You do First Amendment audits. You know exactly what's going on in Chicago. You got your fingers on the pulse of what's going on. And I may know something else, but together, man, we're a powerful force. And then you get a third person and a fourth person. And now there's no cult of personality. Now there's, hey, we're all in the same boat together. You got something I need. I might have something you need. And that's how we all work together. Because, man, let's face it. You can look at rock stars, actors, politicians, and they all got this cult following, and nothing they could ever say could ever be wrong for some of those people. I don't ever want to know that, and of course you're gonna have people like that, and I'm gonna have people like that, and other people are gonna have people like that. But I think if we constantly put out the message that, hey, it's only the message of freedom. Let's just go with the message of freedom. If I fall, you pick up the baton, but we're going for the race. If I fall, you pick me up. If you fall, I pick you up. And then we're on this journey together. And now it becomes this fantastic, I don't know, you're in a coliseum and you're fighting the lions, and you ain't going to make it if you don't get together. If everybody scatters, you're easy to pick off. But everybody gets together back to back. Now we can fight the onslaught. You know what I mean? So it's more like, and I'm not saying that to try to correct you or anything, but I do think our thinking needs to be tweaked a little bit, because you have a specialty. When I watch your videos, man, I'm like, oh man, that would be so cool to be able to talk to somebody like that. You've got this personality that it just fits, and you weave some kind of, like a little humorous thing, but you're also teaching, you're holding the line, like you're not giving anybody any slack, but you're not so hard on it that it makes people throw up a defense. It almost brings down the defense. So I can learn that from you, and vice versa,
So if you speak the truth, that will always touch somebody's soul. Like, you cannot deny the truth. There's something about that on the subconscious level, the person will know. Do you understand? When you're being completely honest with yourself. And the cops aren't always wrong, in my opinion. They're not. And we need police in this country, because we're ruled by the rule of law. We're governed, I'm sorry, by the rule of law. So I think it's a systemic problem, but I don't want to go around and just every officer get angry and yell at. But who was Brian from High Impact Vlogs and Flicks? Where did you grow up, and how was your life before, and what made you get to this point where you want to spread truth over the internet?
I grew up pretty close to, where South Bend, Indiana is?
Mm-hmm.
South Bend, Indiana is right on the line of Niles, Michigan. I remember my dad and mom, they would load the kids up in the car, and we would go to Chicago a lot. So I grew up in South Bend, Indiana. If anybody knows what the claim to fame there is, it's Notre Dame University. Probably 90% Catholic town. So I grew up as a Catholic kid, going to mass, being an altar boy. And in 1980, my dad moved us all to Nashville, Tennessee. I went to a high school in Hermitage, Tennessee, and then I went to Middle Tennessee State University. But I wasn't politically involved at all. Not until I read about this guy named Ron Paul in 2008, and even then, I didn't really. The spark didn't hit until I read this book called The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. I don't know if have you ever heard of it?
No.
Yeah, it's
No.
Creature from Jekyll Island, where it talks about the Federal Reserve, the inception of the Federal Reserve. Matter of fact, that's how the Federal Reserve got started. Is they met at Jekyll Island, Georgia. I mean, it sounds, Jekyll and Hyde, but the Federal Reserve, the Morgan interests, they all met. Paul Warburg met at an island, a retreat in Jekyll Island, Georgia, and started the Federal Reserve. And that just major intrigued me because it talked about the monetary system, the value of silver and gold, what the Federal Reserve did in 1913 when basically they co-opted the currency of the United States. Amschel Rothschild said, "Give me control over a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws." If you have somebody controlling your currency, you are a slave to them. And if they can print all the money they want and they can determine the value of your currency and therefore the value of all goods and services in your land, they own all the cards. And just as a side note, if anybody's ever played the game Monopoly, the Monopoly guy, that's JP Morgan. JP Morgan owns the dice. He owns the pieces. He owns the cards. He owns the board, and he owns everything in the box. That's the idea with Monopoly. So I got really intrigued about that. And then in 2012, I started reading more and more about Ron Paul and libertarianism, and it's never right to initiate unjust force and violence on people who haven't done anything wrong, which resonated with me because I'm like, not only is that common sense, everybody knows that. If you're walking down the street in Chicago, man, and somebody bumps into you and takes your wallet, well, you recognize that as wrong. If the person who did that to you, if they have any rationality or any sanity in their mind, they wouldn't want you doing that to him. And that alone is what makes it wrong. That's why you don't need a constitution. You don't need politicians making laws. You don't need a holy book. You don't need to hide behind religion. All you got to do is ask yourself one question. Is what I'm about to do to that guy or that woman right there something that I would want done to me without my consent and approval? And if the answer is no, then you shouldn't do it because it's immoral. If you wouldn't want it done to you, don't do it to somebody else. So when I started reading the Ron Paul stuff, I became a delegate. I actually became seriously politically involved to the point where I became a delegate to my state convention, which was in Norman, Oklahoma, then went to the national convention in Tampa. And as soon as I went, get this, at the convention in Oklahoma, in Norman, Oklahoma, it was Ron Paul versus Mitt Romney, okay? Ron Paul's the crowd there for Ron Paul outshadowed Mitt Romney like you would not even believe, to the point where Ron Paul's line went around and wrapped around the entire building on the outside, and literally there were only two people at the Mitt Romney table. We won the state convention and they gave it to Mitt Romney because that's the guy the GOP wanted in. And then I went to the state convention in Tampa that year in 2012, and you could see the teleprompter, this then Speaker of the House, Boehner, was just reading the teleprompter, and it's supposed to be voice vote, ayes or nays. If the ayes are louder, the ayes get it. If the nays are louder, the nays get it. They didn't care what the voice vote was. They just went by the teleprompter. And from that moment on, I realized politics is a game. It's theater. It's a dog and pony show. It's bread and circuses. It's not what people think it is. It's completely rigged. It's completely fixed on the national level from top to bottom. It doesn't matter who you vote for. It's like Stalin said, hey, it doesn't matter who the people vote for. Every vote is a vote for us. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish everybody could have seen what I saw. And there's recordings. There's tons of recordings out there where you can't actually see it afloat. But what we're seeing right now with I'm not going to mention the cerveza bug. Dealing with this cerveza bug is a full-scale pandemic, scamdemic, where they're using this to crash the economy and blame some invisible bug nobody's ever seen. For goodness sake, we don't even know if it exists. We don't know why these people are dying. But it's just a cover story. It's just another part of the bread and circuses. Like Voltaire says, give the people bread and circuses, and they shall never revolt. As long as you got your slaves comfortable, they're okay with the chains of that slavery, you know. As soon as they get uncomfortable and start asking questions, now you got a dangerous slave who is on the brink of being free.
Yeah, and let's just go back into something we talked about yesterday, because this is an interesting topic. Like, when people ask me, and that's why I kind of stayed away from it altogether, because at the end of the day, I don't know. I can't put gloves on and get into a lab and study it underneath a microscope. I don't know. So I have to take somebody else's opinion for it. And I see the internet, there's these polarizing opinions. It's either this or this. This is what it is. We know. The guy down the street from me works for State Farm. He's telling me what happened in China. China's a communist country. They don't let any intel in or out, let alone the Mike from Allstate down the street. Everybody just feels like they know. But why? What if? What? So we know that the dinosaurs lived here at one time. Something happened and wiped out a whole species on this planet. How do you know that that's not happening again?
You mean as far as this cerveza bug and the virility of it?
Yeah. How do you know? How are you so certain that it is not real? Have you studied it, or are you just taking what people say and putting it together and using psychology?
Well, it does. Let me just say, it doesn't matter if it's real or not, because what matters, all that really matters, is what you can see. Okay. There is a measure of belief in everything that you and I do and say, right, on the internet. There's a measure of belief when we put stuff out there, but there's also a measure of knowledge. And belief will forever be the enemy of knowledge, because the only reason we're believing something is because we're admitting we don't have the knowledge to tell you, hey, I know this to be true versus I believe this to be true. There's one thing we know about what government and the experts of government and mainstream media are all about. They're all about distracting, deceiving, and dividing us. We can show that empirically. We can show that objectively. What are the chances that over the last 5 decades of American television, 6, 7 decades of American television, that now at this point they've decided to tell the American people the absolute truth, and there's no nefarious motive going on behind the scenes? The chances are nil. 0. So it doesn't matter if cerveza bug is virulent. We do know TB is way more. Tuberculosis is, I did a video on this the other day. TB infects 10 million people every single year. And guess how many people die? 1.5 million lives are lost because of TB every single year. We've never closed one single barbershop.
Another one thing I want to tell you, because on the West Side, I think this is a problem. I've been at 2 shootings in the past 2 days on the West Side. Now, they're not locking up. They're not locking. Now, the West Side of Chicago has the most open-air drug markets in the nation. I mean, it's literally right there. They're not locking up drug offenses. In fact, Cook County Jail is at 5,000 or under 5,000. It's used to have 11,000. It's the lowest of all time. So these people see that, and there's just this flood of people at these dope spots. And they know the police aren't arresting them. They know the police are getting all non-violent drug offenders out. these shootings that are happening are people now going, madness happening because all this money, like when a depression goes up, drinking goes up, people need to calm their sorrows. So these drugs are becoming these gold mines. That's why you keep on seeing murders on my channel, is because they're fighting over that turf. Because there's only a finite amount of time, or they don't know where the police look the other way and they're not arresting people for drugs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
You could see it. You could see that cycle already. Wherever we're at, over there, they're about 5 weeks ahead of us, where they're fighting over something that they believe is valuable, and they're killing.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy today, 30 shots in front of the lieutenant. He's like, I don't know how he didn't see me. He's like, there's no way he could not see me. And he dumped 30 shots in his car, and that was only 5 blocks from the place I was at yesterday at the exact same time.
I don't know if your audience remembers, but back in the 1940s and 50s, General Eisenhower, then President Eisenhower, warned the people against the dangers of the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex will come against your freedoms, and you're going to be footing the bill for generations to come.
It's reported that the USA's defense budget was somewhere between $587 billion and $597 billion. President Trump plans to pump an extra $160 billion into defense. The prediction from the 2019 defense spending will have reached $686 billion.
Anybody who's for the military-industrial complex and gives them 1 cent worth of increase, which goes to the Pentagon, they're not your friend. They're your enemy. They're your avowed enemy.
So who are we dropping these 125 bombs on a day? Because I know we're trying to get out of Afghanistan. I would assume that's war. Well, who?
Yeah, we're not trying to get out of Afghanistan. We're not. We are specifically in Afghanistan is because the dollar needed help. See, okay, here. Let me just back up real quick. And on August 15th, 1971, Nixon got up on national TV and he said, "We need to save the dollar against the international speculators." He closed the gold window, reneged on the Bretton Woods 1945 agreement to peg the dollar at $35 an ounce gold. And he had to do that because we had to get into Vietnam. You can't stay in Vietnam unless you have easy credit and free money that's decoupled from gold. So he closed the gold window on August 15th, 1971. We ramped up things in the Vietnam War. And by the way, we were in Vietnam for one lie. And that lie was McNamara said we got fired on. The USS Maddox got fired on by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. It was all a lie. That one lie cost the lives of 58,000 servicemen, American servicemen, 1.5 to 3 million Vietnamese, collateral damage. And Charles de Gaulle of France, who was the prime minister of France at that time, looked over and goes, how the hell are they able to afford this extended period of war in Vietnam without credit? Hey, what's going on with our money? Germany gave America their gold. France gave America their gold. We had the gold reserves in Fort Knox. So what Charles de Gaulle determined was, okay, something happened here. You've decoupled something. I don't know what's going on, but here, you take this fiat currency. I want my gold back. That's when Nixon got up there on August 15th, 1971 and said, we're going to defend the dollar against the speculators. They decoupled gold. As soon as they did that, the dollar dropped because it didn't have any kind of backing. So there was this huge upheaval in the financial system. Henry Kissinger came in 1973, struck a deal with OPEC and King Faisal. They shook hands with Nixon and they said, okay, I tell you what, you have to buy our dollar. Here's our arrangement. We will give you all the military force you need to defend your oil fields. We will protect you, but here's what we need in return. You have to tell, this is the Saudis. This is the deal we struck with the Saudis and OPEC. You've got to tell all nations, and all nations, by the way, need energy. And the best way to resource and energy you can get is oil because it's cheap. You can get it out. You can get it out fast. You can transport it easily. It's easily assimilated into economies. So no nation as of 1973 with this OPEC deal can buy oil unless they convert their currency to the US dollar. That created an artificial demand for dollars. Because if you don't have a demand for dollars, your dollar was going to go to zero. So it's called the petrodollar. They decoupled it from gold and linked it up with petroleum. Well, later on, as you keep going after 9/11 and all this kind of stuff, the dollar starts tumbling and stumbling. Well, on October 2000, Saddam Hussein decided, you know what, screw this dollar business. We're going to go with the euro. Well, the United States didn't like that. The Project for the New American Century wrote their thing that we need a catalyzing and catastrophic event, like a new Pearl Harbor, end quote. 10 months later, 9/11 happens, and then we use that as the justification to march in there, grab Saddam Hussein, take him off of the euro, put him back on the dollar, and then Muammar Gaddafi goes, you know what, screw this dollar thing in 2003. We're going to go on the gold-based dinar. We don't need your dollar anymore. Well, guess what? Hillary Clinton got on the case. She was the Secretary of State. She goes, we came, we saw, he died. They kill Gaddafi. They take it off the dinar, put the dollar back, because you can't be a nation who does not want to play the game with America. And I'm talking about the American powers that shouldn't be, about this fiat currency Ponzi scheme that we got going that's really called the petrodollar. Another thing we did in 2000, that's why I'm going to lead to Afghanistan. The reason we're in Afghanistan for two reasons. Number one, we commandeered 90% of the world's opium trade. It comes from Afghanistan. Our American troops are there protecting poppy fields to facilitate a drug war in America and around the world that the American government is making money on that side of the deal and on this side of the deal with the military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex. Because if you're caught with the drugs that they made sure came to market, then your ass goes into jail, which beefs up the federal spending for the prison industrial complex. It's this revolving door of a perpetual motion machine of money making at the expense of the freedoms and monetary value of the United States.